add my 2 cents in there somewhere too.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everybody. This is Sunshine with the Private Room with Tiffany, and tonight it is just myself and the other Miss Tiffany, Miss Tiffany K. And tonight we are talking about human trafficking and what you need to do to protect yourself, to protect your children, your family, and then to help protect the community. So Tiffany is going to be leading tonight. I'm going to be watching the comments. We do need your interaction tonight as we talk, because we want to make sure that we are raising awareness and spreading some education around human trafficking. So you participating tonight would be very, very helpful for us. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Miss Tiffany.
Hi, everyone. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. Like Sunshine said, it's going to be a very informative and special episode because I am going to be speaking about something that I'm extremely passionate about. And that is to bring awareness to the human trafficking issues that we tend to see throughout social media, and within our own communities. I myself am a survivor of human trafficking, which I will get into my story a little later. But I want to start off by asking the question of what do you guys think or know about human trafficking in regards to its definition, what it means, and what it entails. I'm going to go over some statistics and also some preventative measures to take so that you guys can keep safe as well as your family and your community safe. And also some resources in case anyone might think or believe that someone that they are close to might be involved, whether it be recruiting, just a bunch of stuff that I will definitely get into. So I first want to start off. I'll tell you guys my story. I'll give you the short version because we don't have much time. But I was recruited into trafficking at 19. It happened in New York, and I was going simply to visit friends. I happened to be introduced to a mutual friend. Actually, she was a friend of my friend, if that makes sense. I was very naive, very vulnerable. But one thing I have to say is that I am smarter than I thought I was. I ended up being kind of, I don't want to say coerced by her, but she kind of led me away from the group of friends. In doing so, I was lost. I didn't know where I was. At the time, my cell phone was dead because at that time, cell phones only had a battery life of like 3 hours. So I'm basically telling on myself as far as how old are you? But anyway, so she brought me around a guy, and I kept saying, I want to go back. I want to go back. I want to go back. And every time I said I wanted to go back, she would tell me, oh, I'll take you back. I'll take you back. But first, let me go ask my dad for some money. So we ended up walking 52 blocks. And if you guys are aware of New York and how big their blocks are, they're not like the little blocks like down here in the South. So
yeah, that's pretty huge.
yeah, it took us quite a while to get to her house. So, but I also realized that she was taking me the long way because she was trying to see if people would be interested in me. In a way, she was trying to sell me herself.
Oh,
I
wow.
wasn't aware. All of this kind of happened as I learned more about trafficking. And just to put it out there, back then, trafficking wasn't even a word. It wasn't a reference point at all. It was just pimping and hoeing. That's it. So, I get to her house and she's like, let's go ask my dad for some money so we can take the bus and I'll take you back to your friend's house. So now she's speaking my language. Now I'm like, okay, cool, let's go. So we go, we ask her dad. He didn't have any money. So she's like, well, he gave her enough for us to get on the bus. So I'm thinking, oh, okay, I'm in the clear. I'm going to end up going back to my friend's house. Everything's going to be cool. Well, while we're on the bus, she brings up the statement, oh, we're going to make one more stop before I take you back to your friend's house. And I'm like, for what? And so basically she's like, well, I'm going to go ask my daddy for more money. So me being the naive Tiffany back then, I didn't know what she was referring to. So in my mind, I'm thinking, we just left her dad. Like, are we going to see her uncle, her godfather, her grandfather, stepfather? I didn't know what she meant when she said daddy. So when we get off the bus, and this is I like pointing this out to people because to me, this is a sign of hope. But the imperative part of the story is when I got off the bus, I noticed that there was a broken payphone. And in my mind, I was like, damn, how could somebody have broken a payphone like that? Like it was literally snapped in half, hanging on by wires. So we're walking down the street and I see a bunch of guys like on this porch. And I could still remember exactly how the layout was geographically because trauma does that to you. I remember saying to myself, oh my God, I hope that we're not going to this house. And just as I was thinking that, she stopped in front and the guy at the top was like, what do you want, ho? To her. And I was thinking to myself, hold up, wait a minute. She just said we're going to see her daddy. And this guy just called her that. So it wasn't computing. I was like, wait a minute, what? Like, I'm like confused. I was like, there's no way. So she's like, where's my daddy? So he said, hold on a second. So this guy comes out, this young, good looking guy comes out, decked out with chains and rings on his hands. Every finger had a ring on it. And he yells down to her, what do you want, bitch? To her. And I'm like, oh, hell no. I knew something was wrong the minute the guy called her a hoe, but I couldn't put my finger on what exactly it was that was wrong. So she says, oh, daddy, look, I brought us a new hoe, referring to me. At this point, I'm looking around for my shadow and I couldn't find it. So I was like, I know she's not talking about me. I know she is not talking about me.
Are you verbally saying that, or all of these
In
thoughts are
my
in
head,
your
in my
head?
head,
Okay.
all
Okay.
while shitting a brick because I was scared. I didn't know where I was at. I didn't know how to get to where I wanted to go. I had no way of contacting anybody. This is like the early 2000s. So I'm like, oh, geez. So he sent us downstairs to the basement of this building where this woman was cooking. And so she, gave us a plate or whatever. So I hadn't eaten that whole weekend. So I was scarfing it down. Like I didn't care what it was, how she made it, whatever. I was scarfing it down. So then he comes and he's like, all right, let's go. So he has me and her follow him to like this schoolhouse where there was like these steps. And so he was sitting on the steps and the way he introduced himself to me was I had to kiss his knuckles. And he told me, like, on both hands. And he told me, he's like, so I just want to let you know that if you don't come correct with my money, you're not going to make contact with my fist this peacefully or something to that effect. Basically, he'll knock me out if I don't come correct with his money. He was explaining to me the ins and outs, where I'm allowed to step onto the street and where I'm allowed to step on the sidewalk. I'm not allowed to make eye contact with no other man. Um, if he talks, I listen. If he tells me to do something, I do it. Um, he told me that if he finds out another man, if I make eye contact with another man, that's automatically a beat down because he owns me now. And I guess if a woman that he owns makes eye contact with another man, that means that that man now has ownership over her because she wasn't loyal to her pimp. It's the politics of it is really, yeah. So he was telling me how in Hunts Point, it's a free for all. You just go out there and you make your money. But if you're downtown, you don't step foot onto the sidewalk because the sidewalk is meant for people with money. And I was just a gutter bitch. So all of that, and I'm playing along. I'm like, yes, daddy. Okay, daddy. Because I'm trying to gain his trust.
So wait, okay. I have questions.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So the thing with the phone booth, why did you said that
Oh,
was
I was going to get to
significant?
that part. Yeah, I was going to
Okay.
get to that part.
Okay. All right. And then I
And the
guess
reason why
mhm.
I was building up my trust with him was because of him allowing me to go make that call without him escorting me to the phone booth. So what happened was he was like, okay, he was asking questions. Do I have cousins, female cousins that could come to New York? Do I have friends that could come to New York? I said, no, I just graduated high school. All of my friends are going off to college. I have no sisters. I'm the only girl. He asked me what part of Connecticut I was from. I told him I was from a town clear across the state from where I'm originally from. He asked me my last name. I gave him a fake one. All of this street smart stuff that a white girl from Eastern Connecticut probably wouldn't have known just kind of flew out of my mouth. So I, at the time, I didn't know what I was saying or what I was just trying to get the hell out of there. So he said to me, he goes, you see that phone over there? And I said, yeah. And he was pointing to the phone that I told you about that was broken. He goes, well, I want you to go over there and call your parents and tell them that you're not coming home, that you got a boyfriend here in New York and he's going to take care of you now. I was like, okay, daddy. So because I showed so much, like I was down for it, he told the girl, oh, real quick. He asked me a question, and before I could even answer it, she answered it on my behalf or in her opinion. He ended up coming back and just punching her in the face. Her face just like exploded with blood all over my shirt because she was standing next to me. So now I'm covered in blood from her. She's like this. And then that's when he told me to go make the phone call. So he told her, he's like, you go with her and y'all got 2 minutes to get back to the house. If you're not back in 2 minutes, I'm coming after the both of you. So I said, okay. And he asked me before that, he's like, why are you so quiet? And I said, well, I don't speak unless spoken to. And he was like, ooh, yeah, you're going to be my bottom bitch real soon. So for those who aren't aware of the terminologies that pimps use, bottom bitch is usually the top of his stable. Mm-hmm. He trusts her the most. She gets more of the, control of the girls, I guess you could say. So I'm walking over to the phone. I already know the phone's broken. I'm not going to tell him that. This girl wasn't paying attention at all. She was just like, hee haw, let's go get daddy so I can, introduce you. So she didn't know it was broken. So if anybody was on my side at that time, it was God or the universe or a higher power. Because When I got there, he was watching us from across the street. So I picked up the phone and I was like, what do you want me to do? So he was like, y'all got, he still gave us 2 minutes. He said that we had to go down to the next bodega, which is a corner store, make the call, and be back. I said, okay. So I'm watching him out of my peripheral. He's walking back to the house. And when I no longer see him is when I hauled ass and I ran. I don't know where I was running to. I don't know where I was going. All I knew is that I needed to get out of there. And I'm running. So apparently the girl thought that I was running to get to the phone so that I could make the call and hurry up and get back. I ran past the phone. I ran past the phone, another phone, and I ended up on some bridge. I don't know what bridge it was. All I know is that cars were honking, and we're not, as humans, supposed to be on this bridge. It's like a major highway type of thing. And I'm just running. And it feels like I'm running on air because of the adrenaline. So I get to the train station to take the subway back to Port Authority so I could just get on the bus and get back home. Never mind going back to my friend's house at this point. So I get to the bottom of the platform. She's at the top of the stairs and she's screaming my name to stop. And it was the way she said my name that really made me like stop. And it made me like, it put a chill down my back. So I told her, I was like, look, I was like, just come with me. I'll put you, you can come with me and I'll get you anywhere you want to go. I have money. I didn't tell her I had money because it's none of her business. And it's, besides, if she knew I had money, she would probably try to, you know, manipulate me to give it to her, some shit. So I'm like, just come with me. She's like, I can't. He knows where my parents live. He'll kill them. He'll kill me. He'll kill you if he finds you. I wasn't about to get into it with her about me lying and telling him where I was from and whatnot. So I was just like, I gotta go. If you're not coming, I gotta go. So I left her there. And to this day, I don't know what happened to her. I found out she was only 17. I found out at that time, like in that time period, a lot of the pimps, if the girls didn't do as they were told, they would kill them.
Do you remember what part of New York you were in? Someone's asking in the comments.
Bronx. I was in the
In the
Bronx.
Bronx.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The Bronx is where she took you, or the Bronx is where you originated from?
I originated from the Bronx.
So do you know where it was she took you? What part of New York she took you to?
Okay, so we started in the Bronx. Where she lived was in Washington Heights.
Okay.
And Lower Dykeman. So from there is where we took the bus. And then we took the bus back over into the Bronx.
So y'all ended, so the daddy pimp was in the Bronx.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I know I found out not too long ago that what they would do is they would like get these apartments near the river and they would literally kill the girls and throw them in the river. And there's a whole island that they have. I can't remember the name of it, but they have, it's like a mass grave of unidentified bodies. So, yeah. And then the year that I moved down here is crazy. This girl that lived in the apartment unit that I was living in at the time in Connecticut, she was one of the bodies that was found in Long Island on the beach. I don't know if anybody heard of the story of Glasgow Beach. I think it was Glasgow Beach. But they just recently found the murderer. But she was prostituting out of New York too. And they came to my door asking me if I knew who she was. And I was like, no, I don't know who she is. So off camera, because they were interviewing me, off camera, the woman was like, yeah, you know, they found her dismembered on a beach. And I was like, oh my God. Well, find out later on that she was a prostitute. So it's out there. And
Yes. Go ahead.
sex, yeah, no, sex trafficking isn't the only part of human trafficking, which is why I'm very adamant about teaching people the different types of trafficking, because a lot of people hear, oh, human trafficking, oh, it's a pimp that's just going to throw me out on the streets, or he's going to drug me, which they do, not taking that away. But it's not just sexual exploitation. There's different types of human trafficking. There's forced labor.
So before
There.
you go on, you have some
Mhm,
definitions. We asked for some definitions, so I'm going to read a couple
mhm.
of them, okay?
Okay. Hmm.
So one person said that human trafficking to me is people selling people for different labor or money, making reasons for little or no pay. Um, Another one says, I define human trafficking as the exploitation of people for sex or labor. The other is human trafficking, from not my knowledge, is using a human, typically taking them to a desired destination, typically for sex work against their will or consent. I'm unclear if relocation is part of the definition. I have someone else, and this is about to make me cry because I've been missing her and she's been in the hospital.
Oh,
um, the other definition, next definition is human trafficking to me is the kidnapping of humans to use to work for free or to have sex with people for free. Um, Another says human trafficking, in my opinion, is sell a person as property. And then it looks like someone is very familiar with New York, and he said Pimp University and Ho College. I'm guessing that's when you said the Bronx. I saw that. I don't know if he's referencing that in particular.
mhm.
Um, and then he also said that, yeah, Tiff, that's a notorious beach for many bodies having been found. So we have a lot of definitions.
Yep. All pretty good as far as their own personal. But the actual definition of human trafficking is utilizing threats, coercion, force, and manipulation towards a vulnerable person to gain power, money, and what's the word? I it doesn't matter. It could go as for power. But the different types of human trafficking is you have sex trafficking, you have forced labor, you have um, financial bondage or debt bondage. You have, give me a second, I'm trying to remember the name of it.
And I'm putting
Organ,
the
or
definitions in the chat too. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
okay, organ harvesting. And this doesn't really apply to our domestic country, but they do it a lot in like Colombia and South America.
Mm-hmm.
But child soldiers for the
Right.
cartel.
Mm-hmm.
It even has gone as far as when you get wigs and you get hair, a lot of the women whose hair gets cut for those things are
Mm-hmm.
promised a large amount of money in very, very poor regions. And they are basically lied to, manipulated on the price. Um, Basically, anything that someone can get from someone else who has a vulnerability is more likely to become a victim. That's why children, I know it's hard to understand and it's hard to even acknowledge, but there are homeless kids out there. They are the top, those and foster kids are the top percentage of vulnerable humans to become victims of trafficking.
Right.
And that goes for all of the different types of trafficking that I had listed.
So I have a question because I know that sometimes um, when people think of human trafficking, like you stated, they think of prostitution. So Can you share what the difference is between prostitution and human trafficking, and does human trafficking have to be a, like mobile? So meaning that the human trafficking has to take place going from one location to another?
No,
Like, can you give us more
no,
on that?
yeah, it's a lot of misconception when it comes to the word trafficking, because when you hear drug trafficking, we know drug trafficking consists of drugs being trafficked to another location. Human trafficking is just a term, an umbrella term. But the prostitution part, prostitution is it's hard to explain the difference because some people have it all.
Mm-hmm.
Prostitution is basically a voluntary act by an adult, whether it be man or woman.
Mm-hmm.
Human trafficking is, with the sex part, is exploiting a vulnerable individual for sexual acts and becoming property of some sort to the trafficker. They lose their power. They don't get paid for what they do. They are mistreated, abused, mishandled, you name it, and it's done to them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very hard for a victim to remove themselves from a situation like that. Because a lot of people ask the question, well, why didn't she just run away? Or why did he stay as long as he did? Because these traffickers, number one, they'll use drugs to keep that person under their hand. They will use tactics of fear, threats, bodily harm. You hear a lot about women who come here from other countries with the promise of being a nanny, or, being a domestic worker in someone's home. And then they get here, their travel, like their paperwork, passports, visas, whatever, is stripped away from them. And they're just thrown into a room with other women from other places going through the same exact thing that they're going through at the moment. So trafficking it's a broad it's more broader than we think it is. It's not just about utilizing movement from one location to the next, although that is part of it.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So what I read was, um, and this is humantraffickingsearch.org. So if the sex industry were a continuum, on one side are adult women and men who are knowing and willingly participants in prostitution, whether through direct exploitation because of poverty or abuse, or by choice, they use prostitution as a means of income. On the other end of the spectrum are human trafficking victims, those forced into the sex industry against their will by some measure of force, fraud, or coercion. And then there's a broad expanse of gray, where the line between choice and force between the sex industry and human trafficking is indistinguishable.
And that's where you find a lot of the manipulation tactics being used, because they go towards the people who come from abusive environments, like
Right.
your foster kids, because kids don't know. Like a pimp could easily go up to a young girl, and I'm going to get into the whole social media thing in a minute too for any parents that are listening. A young girl could easily become a victim, because if the guy is watching her, or say one of her classmates
Mm-hmm.
is is the victim, and he's trying to get her to recruit another girl, he's utilizing who he has on his team already to be his eyes and ears in the system, school, group homes, you name it,
Mm-hmm.
and gain the trust of her. So she's telling her friend, girl, I can't see my parents. They won't let me go out. They're not giving me my allowance. I wanted these shoes and now I can't get them.
Mm-hmm.
All she has to do is say, hey, do you want to sleep over my house one weekend? That house being his house. You see where I'm going with that? So
I
like
totally understand what you're saying. It's the reason why my
so
child
it,
doesn't spend the night anywhere.
And I trust me, that's kudos to you for that, because you never know.
Right.
You never know. And there's also, like, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of familial trafficking, where
Mm-hmm.
family members sell another family member for money
Mm-hmm.
or drugs, or you hear a lot about it with drugs, but um money or drugs, or um like, say they have to pay somebody back,
Right.
and this person has their eye on your child. I'm not saying you, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in that case, oh, let me have your child, let me get your child. Oh, okay, well, if that's gonna save my own ass, sure, there you go. Like, no, that's asinine. But I'm gonna just go over a couple of things that I might have already gone over, but just in case I might have forgotten some things. Um,
So I do have a question. So
mhm.
the other question that I saw, actually, it's in my inbox, um, is to share the risk factors. Are you going to share the risk factors? I guess more risk factors for what does a victim look like? What do the pimps or
Mhm.
daddies or whatever look for?
Mhm.
That's one question that we had. Um, and I think, yep, that's the question I missed.
Okay. All right. Yeah. No, I'm definitely gonna go over that. So, as far as the different types of sorry, trafficking, is there sexual exploitation, organ harvesting or organ removal, which we didn't really get into,
Hmm.
forced labor, forced begging, debt bondage, child soldiers, domestic servitude, and forced marriage, which is another thing we didn't get into. Um, I honestly don't think that we see a lot of forced marriages here in the States, because you
Hmm.
have to have like a parental
Right.
signature on that. Um, some of the myths, I'll go over some of the myths, and then we'll go over like the recruitment methods and stuff like that.
Okay.
So some of the myths are: human trafficking is only sex trafficking, and the truth is, of the 20.9 million victims of human trafficking, only 53% is forced labor, 27%, or I'm sorry, 22% is sexually exploited, and then 17% is state, sorry, it's
No problem.
um it says state imported forced labor.
Got it.
Um Another myth is victims will self-identify. And the truth is that 50% of actual victims um have no way of identifying themselves, because they have no form of identification.
Hmm.
Um, when you get pulled over and an officer asks to see your ID or your license, they
Hmm.
don't have one. They can
Right.
only see their name. And in most cases, because it's a verbal outward, their pimp is sitting right there, or their trafficker is sitting right there. So they can barely even talk at all anyway.
Right. Right.
And they're most of the time told to give a fake name.
Right.
Um, Human trafficking only affects the victim? No. There is a lot of societal problems through through human trafficking, meaning um it can deter property value if it's known that there's a house with multiple women that are being trafficked, because now it's a hot spot.
Right.
Um, it can also bring in more crime to the area, because with sex comes violence. With violence can come, other aspects to, you know, um, a poor societal structure. Let me see
So
if
I
there's
have a
any.
question. What are some of the effects on the victim? And then what are some of the effects on the family?
Good question. Um, some of the effects on the victim is PTSD, um, drug abuse. Um, Sometimes the victim will go back to their trafficker.
Yes, I've heard that.
Um, for the simple fact that that trafficker took care of them, because they lost themselves in the trafficker doing that for them, because prior to that they didn't have anything worth living for, really.
To them,
So
they did.
to them,
Right.
yes, to them. So the trafficker was like their knight in shining armor. And so he's kind of built that camaraderie, I guess, with the victim, that the victim has turned to, like, he takes care of me, he loves me. I've heard that. He loves me. He wouldn't do that to me. He only does that to the other girls. Um as far as the family, it takes a huge toll on the family, because when the victim comes back home, the victim has to relearn life without being someone's property. So
Right.
you have to think about the mental and the emotional and the psychological distresses that have occurred while that victim was in the situation that she or he was in. They're not going to come back the same person that they were. And the family has to be able to support through rehabilitation, support through the meltdowns, because there will be meltdowns,
Mm-hmm.
the rehabilitation of substance abuse, that in most cases wasn't the fault of the victim. Like I
Okay.
said before, it was the trafficker forcing the drugs into the system of this person so that they could be less coherent to know what's going on. Now they've become addicted to these drugs that they didn't even voluntarily start taking. They were forced to take.
Right.
So yes, it does have a very lasting effect on both the individual and the family.
Yes, and if any of y'all are not familiar, there's several movies out there about this, but when she mentioned earlier how sometimes the victim goes back because that person is now has become like their saving grace or actual daddy because they're taking care of them and their thoughts and their opinions, that's called Stockholm syndrome. So that's a psychological response, and it happens when abuse victims basically build a bond with their captor or their abuser. And so, even though it might seem to us as if that's something crazy, but as she said, because a lot of the victims are either, homeless or they're orphans or they're poor or something like that, and they go with this daddy who does provide them food and does provide them shelter, even though they might hit them or something like that, they sometimes see that as either one, better than what they came from, or two, they build such overwhelming emotions for how maybe good their abuser or their captor took care of them, that they build this bond with them, and that's very, very, very hard to break once they come home, especially if they really feel like their abuser or their captor really cared for them. And you find that a lot more in children
Mm-hmm.
than you do in adults. That's been my experience. So I just wanted to share that because there is a name, a technical or clinical name for it, which is Stockholm syndrome.
And I'm gonna add to that. I know I mentioned foster children
Mm-hmm.
and homeless children,
Yes.
and that does not exclude runaways.
Was not.
Um, so these are kids, and then I'm going to get into the social media recruitment and everything from here. So these kids come from neglect, abuse, abandonment. If they are given any kind of attention from somebody that gives them what they ask for, that's the whole point of a trafficker or a pimp, is giving what they want in the very beginning to gain the trust, because they know that these kids are vulnerable. They know that these kids are by themselves. There's no
Mhm.
other adult supervision. Um, they are in need of something or some things emotionally. So that's where the manipulated tactics come into play. And I think the gray area that we talked about a little while ago refers to the older adolescent ages, where the 17 to 21-year-olds who are just leaving adolescent into young adulthood, they don't really know what they want in life. They don't really know what life has to offer, especially if they've come from a broken home.
Right.
So when they meet someone who has some level of stability to them, they're more likely going to gravitate to that, towards that, because it shows them, oh, okay, well, I can have this, I can live like this. He said he'll get my hair and my nails done every week, and all I got to do is what he says. Oh, this is
Right.
easy. I'm
Right.
getting what I want, and I can give him what he wants. And oh my god, so to
Right.
them it looks like this is what I've always wanted. Not to mention what they see on TV, what they hear in music, what they see on social media, what they hear their friends talking about. Um, Social media has a lot of influence too,
Right.
and it's and also I just want to mention one more thing too. Parents, if you have a teenage daughter or son and they are dating, please vet who they're dating.
Oh yes. Please meet the parents. Find out where they live at. Get their
Yes,
last name. All that.
meet the parents. Yes, meet the parents, because if this person doesn't have parents, that's a red flag.
Right.
That's a huge red flag.
Right.
Because you don't want your kids going to their boyfriend or girlfriend's house, and their boyfriend could, or girlfriend could, literally pimp your child out and not even realize it. Oh, well, you remember those Jordans I bought you, right? Well, now
Right.
you got to pay me back for it. So there's a guy or there's a girl in the other room that is gonna do what or you do what they tell you to do, and
Right.
then you're good with me.
Right.
They make them feel bad about it. Oh, I spent all this money on you and you owe me for this. And be careful of the verbiage.
Right.
So, and listen to your child. I know as parents, especially with the way the economy is, we're busy working so that we can survive to live. But if your child is coming to you and saying, Mom, Dad, I really need to talk to you about something, listen.
Yes.
Please listen. Because one thing I do this for, and I tell my story, is so that parents don't have to go through knowing what their child went through like I went through.
Right.
My thing was, I didn't tell my parents what I went through. I did everything by myself. I didn't tell none of my friends because I felt ashamed. I felt
I
very
was
ashamed.
I was gonna ask that question. When you got back home, what did you do? Because it sounds like you averted being an actual, you didn't have the
Yeah,
consequences
I was.
that someone who wasn't able to run had. However, it was still a scary experience for you. So what happens when you knew that you were, well, not safe, because I'm assuming that you didn't feel safe for a while, but what happened when you got back to safety home? What happened?
I definitely I just like kind of like went inward. I felt so shameful for what I went through that I felt like it was my fault, because I had been raped previously at the age of 15, and I was told it was my fault by
You
the
were told
people
it was
who,
your. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, by the people who were supposed to be my support system, my protectors.
I understood.
So once they said it was my fault when I was 15, I didn't think I could go and tell them what I had just experienced, because they would have said, well, it's your fault. You
Right.
shouldn't have went.
Right. And I hate that happened for you. I hate that that happened for
So
you. Mm.
from that time, which was middle of August to early October, I just disassociated myself from everybody. I went into a really dark, deep place in depression. I attempted suicide, and I was angry when I woke up in the hospital. Angry.
You
I
woke up
was
in the hospital? How did you get in the hospital? Oh, you mean the suicide
from the
attempt?
suicide attempt. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay.
So I was angry when I woke up because I didn't want to wake up. That wasn't the purpose of me doing what I did. And it didn't click until 2014. Wow, 10 years ago. It didn't
Hmm.
click for me until like 10 years ago that there was a reason why I went through, and there was a reason why I survived the suicide attempt.
Right.
So it was then that the ball started rolling for me to become more involved with human trafficking and bringing information to people and sharing my story, because the more I tell my story, the more therapeutic it is for me.
Mhm.
Um, However, I'm getting to the point now where I'm just like, oh, do I gotta tell it again? Like, I'm tired of telling it, but I know there's a reason to tell it, so
Yes,
it
please
doesn't.
don't get tired of sharing. Please don't. So we have somebody who commented. He's actually in the education system. He said that he's heard of situations where there was a girl in high school that was a recruiter for some type of trafficking. She was able to lure girls by offering money and gifts. She was always very well dressed, so girls were drawn to the looks and was promised the same type of life.
Mm-hmm. Yep, yep.
Yes.
So another thing for parents, if your child comes home one day and starts asking for these random huge price things that they normally wouldn't ask for,
Hmm.
ask them, how do they know about it? Have you seen somebody wearing Gucci?
Right.
Now here's me being jokey, but is it real Gucci? Um,
Right.
but for real,
Right.
seriously though, just ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask your kid questions. And don't
Right.
be afraid to answer questions your kids might have for you.
Right. I agree with that. I'm very open and honest. And I think that's because I have a background of sexual assault and in my childhood. And so I'm very protective of them. So whenever they ask me questions, even questions I really don't want to ask or answer, or they want
Mm-hmm.
to talk to me about things I really don't want to talk about, we talk about it anyway, because I feel like it's coming from a place that I need to address. Um, and I didn't realize until probably when we started talking about doing this a couple weeks ago, when I was talking to my therapist, and she said that it was could be a form of trafficking, even though I didn't go anywhere. Um, but she said it's kind of that gray area of prostitution and trafficking. I had borrowed money from somebody, and he kept pushing me to pay him the money back, and I couldn't. I was like 19, 18, 19, and it wasn't a lot of money. I think it was less than $100. I can't remember what the amount was, but it wasn't that much. And I went over there to tell him that I didn't have it, and like I offered to give him whatever I had on me. Again, I don't remember the amount. But when I got there, he had three other guys there and was going to try to make me pay the balance by sleeping with his friends. And luckily, when he like pushed me in the room and I pretty much figured out what was happening, I called a friend of mine, and they told their father, and I was like in the window, so I kept banging on like trying to get the window up, and they heard me, so he came in the room and he smacked me across my face. And then the two guys came in there, and kind of was holding on to me, and they would have raped me if his father wouldn't have kept banging on the door and I was screaming, and that his father, um, they let me out the door and like pushed me out the door. And I just kind of ran to my friend's father, and they had the police. He had the police go there and everything. And so the guy, he got arrested, but it was his word against mine. But he did get charges, but it wasn't for what most likely would have taken place. So, um, so yeah, I think more people have had experiences, those gray line experiences that we don't know about, and it's not reported. And then I know that we have a lot of people who have been victims who want to go to the police and it's not reported, that 50% that you spoke of earlier that we don't even know about.
Yeah.
So,
and that's half. That's more than zero. That's too much. Too many numbers there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I want to get to the risk factors because we're about at 50 minutes in. So let's talk about the risk factors. So I think that's really important for us to talk about risk factors.
Alrighty. So risk factors, like I mentioned before, is the vulnerability. Hold on. I just had it. Societal risk factors. We'll go over that, and then I'll go down. So, lack of resources, lack of knowledge of labor and sex trafficking, health and economic disparities, and the demand for cheap goods. As far as community risk factors, there are lack of worker rights, social norms, community violence, undersourced schools, neighborhoods, and communities, and humanitarian crisis and natural disasters. Example of that is when Haiti had their earthquake. I believe that was like 2014. There were a lot of kids that were left parentless.
Right.
So they were very they were vulnerable to the environment. They were vulnerable to the community's lack of resources, and it being a very poor country as it is,
Right.
they became victims very easily.
Right.
So this is where it's going to get even easier for us to understand, because I'm going to get into relationship and individual. So the relationship risk factors are family conflict disruption or dysfunction, lack of supportive adult, peer pressure, social isolation, and familial poverty. Individual, immigration status, history of child abuse, neglect, or malnutrition or maltreatment. Homeless or runaway. LGBTQ plus. That's another community that is very heavily victimized in human trafficking. History of being systems involved, juvenile justice, criminal justice, foster care, and the stigma and discrimination of oneself.
Yes.
So those are some risk factors.
Yes. I'm on the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And she already shared some, but they have on here, people may be vulnerable to trafficking if they have an unstable living situation, have previously experienced other forms of violence, such as sexual abuse or domestic violence, have run away or are involved in the juvenile justice or child welfare system, are undocumented immigrants, are facing poverty or economic need, have a caregiver or family member who has a substance use issue, and are addicted to drugs or alcohol. It says, who are the traffickers? It says that here are a few situations that might raise concerns. So one person put in the chat that expanding on what you said earlier about the expensive items that your child is asking for, they also says that if you are finding very expensive items in your children's room and you know they don't work and or you haven't bought it, then ask questions. So thank you for adding that to that.
Yeah, and I have a bunch of the warning signs of trafficking
Okay.
too.
Okay, I
So,
think that's what this is going to be that I'm about to share. So you go ahead and share.
okay, so I have it split into three. There are speech, behavior, belongings, and peer group. So for speech, you might find the victim to be secretive about who they're talking to or meeting, as far as like maybe your child, a friend, family
Mhm.
member. Sexual knowledge beyond what is age appropriate, dramatic personality changes, and preference for gang colors, doodles, or gang symbols, etc. As for belongings, excess amounts of cash, new expensive possessions, new clothes, shoes, phones, accessories, manicures, etc. Hotel key cards, sex toys, sex items, and provocative clothing, and multiple phones. Peer group, sudden presence of an older boyfriend or girlfriend, isolated from friends and family, classes or youth group, sexually acting out, chronically truant, runaway, or gang involved. So those are warning signs of trafficking. Um,
And I
now,
want to say as yes, I'm sorry. I want to say as a parent that some of those things we might look at like, you know, dressing over sexualizing, dressing provocative, having an older boyfriend. We might discount those things as them being defiant or them being, you know, fast or them being, you know, something that might not equate in our minds as, are they being groomed? Are they being trafficked? Are they being prostituted? We might not want to think of those things, but we really need to think of those things. Like, we really need to know, why is your boyfriend, why is this man 10 years older than you interested in you and you're 14 years old? Or, you know, why are you hanging out with someone that's twice your age? Or, you know, why are they buying you these expensive gifts? What are you doing? What are you doing for them? And some parents might ask that question as if it's their fault that they're submitting to these types of gifts or these this treatment. So we have to be careful too how we word our questions as well, because you could make them uncomfortable to even share what you might need to know. So I just think as a parent, you really need to be careful about, like, for instance, someone told me when I was having a depressive meltdown and, you know, when I was with them, they said that I was being spoiled and I just wanted attention, when really it was my depression that was just escalating, and I was really asking for help or looking for help, and they discounted it to me just being spoiled or me being, you know, not getting my way. So we really have to be really careful when our children are displaying certain attitudes or behaviors, or they say certain things and we don't look into it, and we want to, you know, sometimes as parents we think that we know our kids when really they're giving us so many clues to something much serious that's going on. So we really need to pay attention
yeah,
as as parents. But I think as victims ourselves of rape, sexual assault, domestic violence, that we kind of are a little bit more in tune with those kind of things versus parents that might have never experienced those things. So I want to make sure that I point that out as well, that as parents, we really need to pay attention, and we really need to let our children talk. A lot of times parents don't let their children talk because they feel like kids, they shouldn't talk until they're asked to talk. I know someone that has said that more than once, and I had to correct them on several occasions. Like, children are not just here to just follow
be
your
seen and
commands.
not heard. Yeah.
Exactly. If your child is talking to you about something that's bothering them, that's unusual for them or something like that, then you should let them talk, even if it's something that you don't want to hear, or even if it's something that makes you uncomfortable, because at that moment your child is probably putting out some information or showing some behaviors or doing some things that you really should be paying attention to.
And not only that, but if a parent will listen to their child, that will allow the trust to be built from the child to the parent, so that when the parent feels like their child has to question the child isn't going to feel like, oh God, if I answer, I'm going to get grounded, or I'm going to be on punishment, or this is going to take away from me, and, or, you know, whatever the case might be. The main goal is to build that trust with your child.
Right.
Because what you don't want to do is have your child build the trust with somebody else outside of the home.
Exactly. You want your
Unless it's like
children
a family member, or is somebody that the family is very well known, you know, there's a bond there with the family. But a stranger outside of the home, you do not want your child to build a trust, any kind of trust with them.
You want your child
Especially if
to
you don't
trust
know
you,
them.
to talk to you,
Yeah.
even if it's. I tell that my twins, if don't lie to me. Let's talk about it. If you get in trouble, don't lie to me about it. Come to me and talk to me about it. I don't care if you get in trouble and then you come to me and talk about whenever you feel that you're in trouble, or you're in a situation, or you know that maybe you did something wrong, and you know you realize it, let's come and talk to me. Don't lie to me about anything, because I can't help you if you lie. I can't help you until you tell me the truth, and I know the whole story, and that way I can help you. Don't lie to me, so that way we can work through it together. Even if you know I'm going to be angry, you know I'm going to be upset. And that's because I want my kids to trust me, to be able to talk to me and have open conversation with me. And a lot of parents don't have that line of open communication that they think they do, because the first thing they do is you're in trouble, or you're on punishment, or we're going to whip your ass. And your children aren't going to trust you if every single time they try to, you're threatening them.
Yeah. Or not giving them a level of understanding that they require, because they might become, most of the times kids come to us as parents because they can't make sense of whatever it is they're going through, that they're reaching out to us to help them make the sense.
Right.
And if we don't give them a positive, peaceful, loving, nurturing environment to come to talk, they're not going to want to come and talk.
Right. And they will go talk to someone else.
Exactly. Which is taking me to my next part, because I know we're kind of getting close on time. But trafficking happens online a lot.
Yep.
Through social networks and classified websites, strip clubs, residential or commercial brothels, on the street via individual pimp or gang-based prostitution, fake massage or nail parlors, and truck stops. In 2020, online recruitment increased a significant 22%. That was 4 years ago. 12% increase in reports of recruitment on Facebook over the previous year. So in 2019, 95% increase in reports of recruitment on Instagram over the previous year. So if your kids have Facebook or Instagram, and you are not monitoring what is going on their posts or their messages, DMs, inboxes, or whatever, my suggestion is to be proactive and be active. Because what you do not want is your child to share a picture of the school that they go to, whether it be on their jacket, showing off their degree, anything that has their full name and the name of the school. Because all you have to do is go to Google, enter in the name of the school, and the state that it's in, find the directions to get there, and boom.
Yep.
Now what?
And be proactive, parents. Like a couple of years ago, my family, I had to move my family because there was a man that was grooming my daughter. He was talking to her, saying that he was 16 years old. I'm sorry. Yes, it was a guy. So he was talking to her, saying that he was 15, 16 years old. She was 13, 14 at the time. She's thinking that she's talking to a boy. It just wasn't sitting right with me. She built this trust with him. And one day we were having family over, and all of a sudden a pizza showed up at our house. Now, we were having a cookout. There was no reason for pizza to be delivered to our house. The pizza was delivered to our house. So you know how some of these apps, I don't know if Instagram does it now still, but I know Snapchat does. Some of these apps will pin your location. I know they do it on iPhones a lot. iPhones, you have to turn your location off because these apps will know your location. Her location was pinned. This guy that she was talking to, she should have been talking to him in the first place. That's number one. She should have been talking to him in the first place. He was a complete stranger, but he was a good-looking boy. And so she was talking to him. He was telling her how beautiful she was and all these kind of things. It became very sexual. You know, she did let me know that it was making her uncomfortable, so forth and so on. I told her to stop the conversations, but by that point, she thought it was her friend. And one day we were having a cookout. Two pizzas were delivered to our house, and she said that this person sent it to her. And I immediately called the Papa John's in the area that we were in. I talked to the manager and I asked him, who was this pizza from? And they told me that, and he didn't have to, but I told him my minor child just received pizza from someone who I suspected was an adult that was talking to her on Instagram, and I needed to know who it came from. So come to find out, it was a woman's name on the credit card that was used, and so forth and so on. So there were so many signs that this person was grooming my daughter. And it was to the point where now he knew our address. And I told her, I asked if she had a phone number for him. She never got a phone number for him. I asked her if she had a video call. Every time she said that she tried to video call, they wouldn't answer the phone. So people, parents, you have got to be diligent. You have got to be asking these questions. When your friends are talking about new friends, you need to find out who these new friends are, because my child was in danger, and I realized that my child was in danger, and we literally moved within a month, because now I knew that this grown man, I was able, thankfully, being tech savvy and be the PI that I am, I should have got paid. I should have a career in being a PI. Found out who it was, and it was a grown man, maybe mid 30s, and he had fake profiles all over the internet. And I was able to find him just from finding out from the Papa John's. I could have been like, "Oh, your friend sent you pizza? Oh, that's cool." Some parents would do that. I didn't. It didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel right to me maybe a week or two before that. And this man sent food to my house, and that was confirmation of where my child lived at. And so we've moved within a month's time. But meanwhile, I was scared to death for my child until we moved. And even when we moved in our new house, even to this day, I don't allow her to go outside without an adult, because I don't know if this man has found her. She was off Instagram for 2 years. She's back on now, but I monitor it occasionally. I'm very proactive. I will take her phone in a heartbeat and check her messages. I'll log in. She can't change her password. I'm very diligent about it. So we have to be so careful, and we have to listen to our instincts, but we have to listen to our children. My child has always been open with me and tells me about her friends, who she meets, blah, blah, blah. And because she did, and I asked her questions, and I gave her the trust in me as a parent to tell me certain things, it raised my alarms in me to know that something wasn't right. And so we have to listen to our kids. And this is not just about kids. Adults can be victims too, but we have to listen to our kids. My child has two parents that love her, that protect her, are very protective. My child was in a position that something could have happened to her really, really bad. So we have to watch our kids. We have to really, really watch our kids and who they associate with. And we have to be proactive on Instagram. Since then, my friends after that will call me. Have you seen such and such as Instagram post or Facebook post talking about my kids? Okay, thank you, friends. I go and look. That's a little suggestive. No, take that down. We have to be proactive, and we have to listen to our kids, and we have to give them the space to feel comfortable to talk to us. I
Yeah,
can't.
and don't be afraid to take your kids' phones or iPads or laptops or
Right.
whatever they use that has access to any social media platform, whether it be Snapchat. Snapchat is a really good one that they use now because the messages delete once they're opened. So there's no going back to
Mm-mm.
be able to say, oh, well, they
No
said this.
history, no
They will.
documentation, nothing.
Snapchat is, I believe, one of the biggest platforms that kids use for that reason. as well as grown-ups that like to be like the
Yeah.
pedophiles that play like they're kids, but they're not, and also traffickers. So, like Tiffany was saying, they have like the location pin on Snapchat. Um,
On Instagram too, and
I,
Facebook. You have to turn it off.
okay, yeah, and now with TikTok, any platform that has a direct message link to it, where you can like message privately with someone, is a platform that needs to be monitored. And that's just my opinion. But
No, you're right.
but those are just like the top four right now. There's also the ones that we don't really know about. So as a parent, what I would do is Google what are the top rated platforms for teenagers now, and then go to your kids and say, hey, do you have this, or do you have one of these accounts, or say, hey, I downloaded this thing but I don't know how it works, do you think you can help me out? And if they sit there and they're like, oh yeah, you just do this, then that's when you can ask, listen, how do you know how to do that? You're really good at it. And then they might be, open to telling you, oh, well, I have one too. But you've already done your homework on it. So this isn't like really, safe.
Right.
Do you think that it's, and it shouldn't even be a matter of you asking your child if you can have the access to their accounts. You're the parent.
Right.
You can dictate whether or not you have access or they don't.
Exactly.
So I just don't want anybody's child, sister, mother, cousin, anybody close to them go through what I went through. Because the only way that I can explain, before we get offline here, how it felt that night was, imagine going to a foreign country, you're by yourself, you lost your passport, you have no cell service, you have no idea where you're at. Somebody comes up to you and says, oh, I'll bring you to civilization. I'll bring you to the phone. I'll bring you to the embassy. You put your trust in them for them to do that. And then they turn around and say, no, I'm not taking you anywhere. You're here with me now. Imagine the panic that you would feel if that happened to you. That's how it felt for me. And I wasn't even a full-blown adult yet. So I would never want a child to ever feel that panic, ever. So that's why I do what I do. And I speak out about my experience and the knowledge that I've obtained over the years by studying and researching and really putting forth the desire to want to help make a change in my community so that I can help others make a change in their community. So I'm going to end it with that, but I also want to put out the hotline. So if you happen to know or suspect someone is being victimized by trafficking, you can either give them the number. Most cases they won't call because of their pimp or trafficker, but you can call on their behalf. You can call anonymously. You can text anonymously. So unless, Sunshine, you have anything else to add, I think I pretty much, and feel free to reach out to me in my inbox if you have any other questions that you need answers to that I might not have gotten to tonight. I have no problem answering anybody's questions. So
Thank you. Can you give us the hotline number so I can put it in the chat?
Yeah, give me 1 second. I gotta look it up because I just had it.
And while she's looking for that, we are going to have a follow-up or part 2 to this because our speaker that wasn't able to come on tonight, she has a very traumatic experience with her daughter who was trafficked not once but twice. And so by the same captor. And so that's a story that I feel that we need to still have, and she's willing to reschedule. So we will be having a part 2 to this. And then we're also going to have an organization on that helps victims and what they're doing to help young girls that are at risk, who have those risk factors, help keep them safe, and then what they're doing for those that have already been victims of human trafficking on their journey to healing. So we are going to have a part 2 to this. So I'm ready for the number.
Okay, so it's 1-888-373-7888, and that's the hotline number, the National Human Trafficking Hotline number. And you can also text info to 233-733.
Okay, can you give me the first number? 888-373.
7888.
Okay, or text info to 233-733.
Right. And I also wanted to invite you guys that are watching, you can feel free to follow my group, Lost Voices, hashtag help me help them. I tend to post a lot of information, statistical information, as well as resources for anybody who is interested in becoming an advocate or wanting to help out with bringing awareness. So, yeah.
Great. I am putting the hotline number. I put the hotline number in the live chat thread on the Private Room with Tiffany Facebook page. And I'm also putting the group she just mentioned for people to join if you want more information, if you want to learn more, if you just want resources. If maybe you just want additional support for yourself or your child. So I've dropped that link in the chat as well. So Tiffany, I want to thank you for being not only a co-host of the Private Room, but also for sharing your story. I know that took a lot, even though I know sometimes you get tired of sharing, but please keep sharing. Please keep sharing. I share my story all the time and it never fails. Someone says that it helped them. So I encourage you to continue sharing your story as well, and being an advocate in the community and a community leader when it comes to the prevention of human trafficking. I appreciate you sharing your personal story. And to anyone out there, if you need help or you need to talk or you need support, then please reach out to Tiffany or myself, and we will do our best to help you as well. So thank you everybody for joining. We had a lot of engagement tonight, Tiffany. I'm so proud of everybody that usually watches our normal episodes. And so thank you for tuning in for our community and cause peace on the Private Room. And everyone have a great night.
Good night, guys.
Bye.